just started a healing journey, and in this healing journey, God had told me that I needed to go talk to my father. And I wrote him a poem, and you can read it in my book, Into His Glorious Light. It's the first, it's called the Burden of a Father's Shoulder, or The Burdens on the Father's Shoulder. That is the poem I wrote. And I wrote a letter to my dad. And then I prayed and I fasted about when that should be revealed because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And so I had a sponsor at the time, and I ended up giving that to the sponsor, and I felt God say it's time. So I drove up to High Rolls to go talk to my dad. And there was a lot of prayer. There was a lot of things with that. And that day I was dealing with a lot of turmoil. I was really struggling and really struggling with some sin issues. It was like I was trying to go back to these coping mechanisms of sinning. And I just felt so awful because I'm trying to do what's right, but I'm really struggling with dealing with some of this stuff and trying to cope and trying to make it all work before I tell my dad, because I was very nervous. I didn't want to hurt him. But I also really did want to say I forgave him, because in this letter I talk about how the best parts of me are him, and I believe that the best parts of me are my father, but some of these other parts were damaging. And so I went up to go tell my dad, and we had a beautiful moment. And then God told me to come out here. But there was a huge snowstorm coming, and this place is very significant to me. I did a harvest festival for kids to try to have an alternative for Halloween. My first date with the guy that God told me I was going to marry, and lots of promises happened just right over in this area, which we'll go talk about later. But I really didn't know if I wanted to come out here because I was already emotional and there was already a lot of stuff going on. And there was a huge snowstorm, and everyone was like, don't go out there, don't go out there, don't go out there, don't go out there by yourself. And I really felt like God was telling me to come. And I had heard God say, we are going to walk through all the lies that you've believed, and I want to come meet you out in a place that is still, that you can hear me, where there's no cell service, where there's no cars, where it's quiet, where it's peaceful. Because I need you to walk with me, and we're going to walk and talk. And so I came out here, and this is where we came, and I brought a notebook. And what's crazy about this notebook is I had started this notebook, I don't know, 5 years prior. So the first few pages of this notebook had been done years prior about a promise he had. And now he's saying, we're going to talk about all your trauma, and we're going to work through that. And I need you to come meet me and walk with me and talk with me and meet me, because we are now going to start this healing journey. And so that notebook turned into a bunch of lies that I believed, and the trauma and the walking through these. I think when me and God left here, it was like I had 25 areas of my life that God said we needed to work through. And so he said we had to come out here because I needed to meet him, and we needed to walk through it, because at this time I was so numb. My heart was so hard, because I had gone through so much in my childhood that I didn't even know was trauma. And so God's like, well, we can't bring light to where it's dark, and I can't allow my love and my promise and the marriage I have for you to come through until you can be married to me, until you can be my bride. And now this is where we started. So this is the place where we started. And so I came out here, and I brought just me and my dogs, and it was snowing. It was deeper than this. And the first thing I recognized and I realized in this journey was how alone I was. And how that felt. It felt surreal, I guess, because I was like, if something happens, I am out here alone. There's no cell phone service. It's cold. I had water, I had brought food, I brought my gun just in case, but I am by myself, and I can feel that. I can feel the weight of being by myself out here. And but then I also looked around, and it's like, look how beautiful it is. The stillness of it, and just an awe factor of the purity of the white snow, and just the cold, and how it was cold and you can feel that and you're uncomfortable, but there was a refreshing in the cold. And I just started walking towards the way that I know. I've been here many times. I've camped. Like I said, there's a lot that I have done here. And so I've been familiar with this place. And so I just started to walk, and I just invited the Holy Spirit in. I just invited God to meet me and walk with me. God, come meet me out here where I feel alone, and I feel the emptiness, the vastness. That might be the best word to say, is it feels so vast. It feels so big. It feels so new. It feels so out of my control. Um, but there was something beautiful in feeling out of control because my whole life I've been trying to be in control. And so I think people look at me now, 3 years past the healing journey and when it started, and they go, wow, man, I want to look like you. And I want to see the miracles that you've had in your life. And like, I want to see the goodness of God that you've seen. But the goodness of God started in a place of a lot of turmoil. And I hear people say that, and I'm like, I tell my best friend all the time, like, I don't want people to see my story and think that it was easy. I want people to realize that this story came with so much. This story came with um, heartache and pain and turmoil and struggle and um, fighting and changing, and um, that is what brought the miracles. That's what brought the change. And it started here. This is where it started. And I think it's beautiful that we can come back here and I do feel changed and I do feel different. When I got out here, this was about 2 years ago. Um, the snow was a little bit deeper, but the perspective is still the same. As you can see in the car, from the car view, the snow was so much scarier. Like, even if you look that direction, you can see the snow looks scarier versus when you compare it to the tires. You look at the tire and you're like, oh, like I literally felt God say, because I was driving and I was so upset. I was so angry. I was like, God, this is so scary. Why are you sending me out here? Like, it felt like he was tricking me to go to my doom, like to be stranded out here and I was going to get stuck in the snow by myself after everyone told me not to come out here. But I really felt like God told me to. But when I stepped out of the car and I saw that my tires could handle it, like I could literally see this like stark contrast of like, oh, look, my tires had plenty of room. They wasn't even close to being stuck. I like literally heard God say, like, Rachel, your perspective's off. Like, from the top view, like from where you're looking, everything looks like it's scary and you have no control and that you're literally running to your doom. That's how I felt. But really, I have it all under control. If you could see my view, if you could see the outside view, you would see that I have it all under control and that you have plenty of strength. Your tires, everything has plenty of strength to make it through, and so do you, as long as you abide in me. So, like, that was like the first lesson. Like, I barely got out of my car and God was already speaking to me. Um, and I was almost like ashamed that I had been so dramatic in the car because as we were first driving and the pavement was there and I felt safe with that. And then we had those four-wheelers that that I was behind and I felt safe, right? But then when it was all alone, when it was just me, it was like, do I have what it takes? Do I have the ability? Do I have the skill set to like make it through the snow? I felt so vulnerable and I felt so scared. And I was like, did I hear God wrong? Like, am I crazy? Like, am I hearing God wrong? Like, everyone was like, there's this huge snowstorm. And like I said, it was way more snow when I came back here like 2, 3 years ago. But I just felt so much in my spirit that God wanted me to come out here, that he wanted to deal with stuff. And it was a very early in my healing journey. And so I didn't even know I had all the junk that I had. I just knew that I was very angry and I was very bitter. But as I was in the car, like yelling, I literally was yelling at the top of my lungs. I felt so embarrassed. Like, I felt so ashamed. Like, why did I freak out so much when God had it all under control? So like, that was like the first lesson, and it happened within like 10 minutes of being out here because of the stillness and the beauty and the obedience of saying, okay, God, I'm gonna do something I'm uncomfortable with, but I feel like you're prompting me and I want to be obedient. So um, I think it's also funny because like I was so stressed, but as you can see, the dogs are out here having the time of their life. And it's just such a stark contrast of like, they didn't have the anxiety, they didn't have the fear, they didn't have the knowledge of what I was going through, the responsibility of feeling that. And yet look at them, they're like running, they're having a good time, they're playing, like they were having a great time. And I was still like, ah! My nerves were very high. Um, and so that was like the first lesson that God showed me. I literally was sitting, getting my hair done yesterday, and God just started to pour these things in my heart. He said, you need to go back. You need to remember where you came from and how far you've come. Because even though I've come a long way from the struggle, I still struggle with emotions, and I still struggle as I'm waiting on God's provision and His promise. And then, 3 years later, we're up here, and what I thought, the promise was like everything I was expecting, everything that I thought I was desiring. And still not come back, but my attitude has changed, right? So as I start walking through here, I have my notebook and I'm just talking to God. I'm just saying, God, I love you, and thank you for the perspective that you gave me just even driving in, and thank you for like having such a gracious father in you and in my actual earthly father, because he was so gracious in the talk that I gave him. And I knew that it wasn't easy for your daughter to maybe tell you some areas of their life that was maybe somewhat of a struggle, but his grace in that was so beautiful. And the fact that he, um, heard that and received that, and he took time to process that. And so I'm walking and I'm just praising God for that. Like, thank you for the father that you gave me. Thank you that he can be gracious in it. And thank you for being a father that would meet me out here. And I'm just talking to him, right? And I'm just worshiping him, even though my heart had just been literally turmoil. Like, I literally was just yelling at him. Um, and, but now I've been, thanking him, and I'm worshiping him, because as humans, our emotions change, right? Like, we can be one thing one minute and then the next minute we're another. And at this point in my life, my emotions controlled me. My emotions completely dominated everything that I did. And truthfully, I tried to hide my emotions, but they always came out. And so my whole life at this point had been control and manipulation and demanding things in a certain way. And even coming out here, trying to have a relationship with God, but not really knowing what that meant, not understanding what that meant. Um, I'm only here because I'm like, where's my promise? I'm only doing this because, like, you said you're going to do this, and I'm going to be obedient to that. But my heart just wasn't in a place of understanding that relationship yet. And so, but God was still gracious. Like, he still met me. Like, I literally could feel his presence out here. And I came over here to this bench, and I sat down. And so I came over here to this bench, and the dogs are running and they're playing and they're having a great time. But I can feel the heaviness of what me and God are about ready to go through. Like, I can tell that God wants to do something. I just wipe off the snow so that I could see like the beauty of all the trees and everything. And I'm sitting here and I'm just looking out, and I'm just writing in this notebook as he's telling me these things that had affected my life, and the things that I would have never thought would have affected my life. And I'm starting to cry. I'm starting to cry, but I don't even think I understood the weight of why I was crying, other than I knew from this moment that my life would never be the same. I knew that if me and God were going to go through these things, that I wasn't going to leave here the same. And I don't think I could possibly understand what that meant in that moment like I do now, right? Like 3 years removed from that. But I just knew, like, the heavy, I wouldn't really call it a burden. There was weight to it. Like, this is going to change your life. And in this moment, I don't know if I knew if it was going to be for the good. I didn't know, whatever. I just knew that I couldn't be where I had been, and that things had to change. And so I'm sitting here and I'm looking out at the views around me, like just the snow and the beauty, and I'm writing and I'm writing. And you see, I was blindsided when God told me that my childhood wasn't as good as I thought. And I was blindsided because I thought the way that I acted was normal, and the things that I felt, and my inability to connect, and my inability to feel love, and my inability to do these things. I thought, like, I actually was actually proud of it. Like, I'm not like other girls, and I don't need people, all these things, right? And here I am sitting in the middle of this beauty, in the middle of this vastness, and realizing maybe not everything is as I thought it was. And again, um, it wasn't like my childhood was horrible. It was like these certain little things in my life that happened had left marks on me. And those marks were keeping me from having the relationship with Christ and seeing him the way that I was supposed to. And I, uh, I think that this was the moment sitting here writing in my journal that I recognized that I couldn't be who I was anymore. And part of me was going to have to die, and I was going to have to be reborn. And I didn't realize how much I needed this quiet place, this beautiful place, to recognize that I wasn't going to be the same and things were going to change. And I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't get to know what that meant. All I knew is that I was going to have to grab God's hand out here in the middle of the cold and the vastness and the quiet. I was going to have to learn how to grab God's hand because I wasn't going to be able to do this journey alone. And I was grateful for it, but I don't think I could possibly understand what that could mean in that moment, in that time. Um, and now just sitting here, I'm emotional a little bit because I can. 3 years later, I can see that I am so used to listening to God and hearing his voice. And when I came here, I had no idea the journey that I was about ready to go on. And I didn't understand the struggles that I would have with the suicide and the self-harm and not knowing that there would be a period of about a year that it was like I didn't even want to wake up in the morning, that there was a time that I was so afraid of, if something happens to me today, am I going to commit suicide? Because I lived in that place and it was the worst torment. It was the worst torment that a person can be in. You know, I think people are selfish because they want to commit suicide. And I can understand that point of view. But from my point of view, and I've struggled with this in and out of my life, and I thought I had dealt with it. You know, I had 16 years of not really struggling with it, but it was just so hidden under a hard heart, control, alcohol, pills, marijuana. It was so hidden under that it had not been dealt with. And so I didn't realize this day would change the rest of my life, because from this day on, I then started to resurface these things that God said we had to deal with. And see, in my naiveness before I came out here, God said he was going to deal with things. And I said, well, if you're going to deal with it, then we're going to deal with all of it. I'm not going to be slow about it. Like, we are going to take all of it, God. I don't want it to be 15, 20 years. Like, we are going to hit this headstrong. And I had no idea what I was saying when I was saying this, because what happened from this day on was a walk and a trial that changed me for the good. But it felt so bad in the beginning. It felt so cruel. And it was hard to see God's goodness in that. And I don't think people could possibly understand the feeling of feeling like you're getting ready for a marriage, the feeling of feeling like God is ready to bring all his dreams. And actually, maybe I say that, I think maybe lots of people have gone through something like this, right? To go to a place where everything you've known is now going to be undone, and you're going to have to face your suicides and the trauma that led to that, and the relationship with your parents and your family is going to change, and just feeling like I lost everything. My job, that changed. My house started to fall apart. It felt like, by making this small step and saying, yes, God, I'm willing to die out here and walk away as a new Rachel. For the first year or two, it felt very harsh as I lost everything, and everything started to slip through my hands. But God is good, and I can come back here 3 years later and say things have changed. And so I think one of the hardest things about coming back here were the memories. Like I said, I had not walked through my trauma or my pain, but I knew that I was hurting, and I knew I was hurting more than I've ever hurt before. And so I looked out here in this area where I'm walking now, and I remember the time that I came out here. I actually remember 2 times very vividly. I came out here with my friends and the kids, and this was a time that I really felt like God had laid on my heart that Halloween was not okay to celebrate, not even a little. And I wanted to create a new tradition. I wanted to be able to glorify God and to worship him and to bring his goodness into the holiday without being distracted by the candy and the costumes. And so I created this harvest festival, and I come out and I prayed and I anointed it. And me and my niece and my nephew and my friends and some other kids came out here, and we had such a beautiful time. And it was just, the memory was so stuck in my head about like how beautiful God uses seasons, right? And how beautiful He uses like the environment, the woods, the forest, like just the stillness of it all. And so I was thinking about seasons when I was out here, and I was thinking about how different it looked when I came out here for that Oktoberfest or that harvest festival that I created, that I started to get off the ground, where we literally did praise and worship while having fun with kids. Like it was this great time and great memory. And then I thought about the time that me and my brother went out here, and all the leaves had changed, and it was this, it almost felt like we'd taken a step into heaven. Like it was a fairy tale. And I looked at my brother and I was like, this is a fairy tale. Because all the leaves had changed and there were so many different colors and it was so beautiful. And I felt like I had taken a step into heaven that day. And it is one of my favorite memories. And so I'm out here now and it's winter and it's cold and it's beautiful, right? It serves its purpose. It's winter, just like fall serves its purpose, right? I'm having these memories and I'm thinking to myself, like, will I ever feel that joy again? Will I ever feel that happiness? In this moment, in this time 3 years ago, I didn't know if I could. I was just so broken. I was so hurt. I was so confused. Um, Desperately clinging to God's promise and hoping He'd bring it back. And as I was thinking about that and I was thinking about coming up here and what I would say, like God put in my heart to talk about seasons and how they change, and how sometimes we get stuck in a season and we think it's going to last forever. But just like right now, this serves a purpose. Winter has a purpose. It has its own beauty. It does things in the environment. And it's it's it allows for the forest to do what it needs to do, right? But it's only a season. And then there's that season, like when me and my brother came up here and there was leaves everywhere and it was beautiful and it was awesome and it was an awesome season, and that has a purpose, but it's only a season. And the forest needs that season. But then I think about the times that we went camping up here, and man, me and my niece and my nephew and a whole bunch of friends had to come up and lug all our camping gear back and forth up this hill. Over and over and over again. And I thought about that season as I started to come up to this area. And I remembered our camping, and I remember shooting bow and arrows out here, and I remember laughter, and I remember joy, and I remember some of my deepest, darkest moments. I went on a camping trip up here with a bunch of friends. And this was a time that I was really going, hey, should I continue drinking? And I was contemplating it. And I was really feeling a pull in my heart that I shouldn't drink anymore. And my niece and nephew met me up here, and I had a friend, and actually a few guy friends up here, my brother. And I got into my favorite brewery, and I got my favorite beer, but the beer was really, really strong. And I drank a little bit too much. And literally my friend told my niece and nephew, she goes, she used me as an example of, well, you see how Auntie Rachel's kind of tipsy and acting silly right now. And I can't even remember the example that she used, but I remember that broke my heart. And I remember that, like, I knew in that moment things had to change. But you know, this season was the summer. This season up here was the camping time, but it was only a season, and it changed, but it had its purpose. And God was telling me, you know, Rachel, the seasons, they happen when they're supposed to. They're never delayed. They're always on time. And you don't have to, like, beg them to come. And I've been sitting here going through season after season after season, and I don't think I've really enjoyed the seasons and what they bring and the necessity of them. And as I was thinking about what to say today, like, I'm going through a little bit of a hard season right now, but I keep saying it's only a season, and it has its purpose, and it's changing me. And even though it's hard, it's using and it's growing muscles in me that I need. And I think it's going to propel me into my ministry and the things that God has me for. And I can see that. And when I can see that, I can enjoy the season because I know it's not going to last forever. And I mean, how often can you come up here and see the white and the pureness and the clarity and the beauty? But we don't want winter forever. And we don't want fall forever because then it loses its wonder. But also, we get stuck there and we get complacent. So each season has its beauty. Each season brings its amazingness. And each season grows muscles in us. And guess what? Most of the time, we don't want to grow those muscles. Most of the time, we're like, God, I don't want to do this. And we go kicking and we go screaming. But now, looking back from it 3 years from now, if I didn't have the things that I went through, I would still be that lost girl sitting on that bench, waiting for a promise more than she was caring about waiting for the promise giver. Still that girl questioning his character. So that girl not really knowing who he is, knowing about him, but not really knowing him, wanting to, but not really knowing him. Because see, it took going through my trauma. It took going through some things that felt like they were torture, but really it was to grow some muscles in me so that I could move on to the next season, be prepared, be ready. It took me breaking everything about myself off of me. It took heartache, and it took pain, and it took desperation to grab onto God, to really meet him and walk with him in relationship. Since this day, 3 years ago, I've been walking with him in relationship everywhere. I've been inviting him to tea. I've been dancing with him. I've gone on hikes with him. And it made me realize that he's real, a real relationship. And just like in humans, because I'm human, he's not human, but I'm human, sometimes it's messy. And sometimes I'm up and I'm down. But you know what? God's always there, and he's consistent. And so coming back here and coming back to these memories and these places, like I didn't know this was like I was going to talk about. I've forgotten some of these memories, but I just think about all God has done because of a few seasons and a few muscles he had to build and how much of it I missed because I was so upset about the season I was in. But I couldn't just be like the dogs playing in the snow, like Table's over there climbing a mountain, having a great time, because he doesn't think about all these things. He's just a dog that knows that if I'm here, he's safe, and that he's exploring right now. He's like all the way up that mountain, but he can explore because he knows who I am, and he knows that I'm good, and he knows that he's safe, and he can just enjoy where he's at. And I feel like I'm almost to a place that I can do that with God, and maybe I am at that place, and I think it's the most beautiful thing ever to just be free. Like, I just want to be free like my dogs, like just running around, having a great time, no care in the world, just enjoying where I'm at and not worrying about when fall's going to come or when spring's going to come. They're going to come when they're supposed to come. I mean, I'm not saying you don't pray. I pray all the time, but I'm saying you don't have to beg. You don't have to compromise. You don't have to. I feel like I spent so much of my healing journey just telling God, well, I'll be obedient, or I'll do this, or I'll do that, or pray, 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 fast, fast, fast. And sometimes God was like, maybe I just wanted you to enjoy the season, to play in the snow, to be childlike, to enjoy life, versus trying to force each season to change on its own when it's not going to. It comes when it's supposed to, it leaves when it's supposed to, and it does what it's supposed to. I think God uses nature all the time to give us his character. The very end of this journey, I knew I was going to have to deal with something that I didn't want to. And as I was walking back to the car to go back home, I started walking toward this area where my heart was broken because there were so many beautiful memories in this area. And I had gone on my first date with the guy that I felt like God told me I was going to marry. And I'm still believing in, even though it's been 3 years, right? And in this point in time, it had only been a few months, but those few months felt like a lifetime. And we had played games over here, and we sat on this log, and he made me some promises that I always wanted to hear, and I never thought a man would ever make. And came over here, and I walked in here, and I just started to weep because I was like, God, I don't understand. Like, I feel like I've done everything you've asked me to do, and I feel like I crossed all my I's and dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's, right? I fasted and I prayed and I went to others, and I just felt so broken. I felt like a fool. I felt like I was lied to. And I couldn't understand why something I had been praying for 12 years and I had been so diligent about praying for. And when this person came, like, we both had prayed so hard and we both had heard the same thing. And I had gone to my pastors, like, I'd done all the things. And even after the promise didn't seem like it was going to happen, God had said, I still want you to believe. I mean, it's 3 years later, and God is still saying, I still want you to believe. And the rest of the world is like, hey, I don't want you to believe. Um, but I feel like God is really wanting me to stand in faith and stand on his promise. And it's hard. Like, even now, you can see I'm emotional because it's hard. But, I've done a lot of research in the Bible. And what I found is when God makes a promise, a lot of times, the ones that we call the ones that stand in faith, well, they go through a lot of trauma. Like, they go through a lot of stuff beforehand. I mean, we talk about how faithful Abraham was. Well, we seem to sometimes forget about how he sold his wife off almost like a sex slave to two kings, right? Before that, when there wasn't even an issue, like he thought there would be an issue. But God protected in that time frame. But he also taught Abraham something in that. Abraham had to go through some stuff. And while I feel like people keep saying, well, you have to surrender the promise back to God. And I do, but I question sometimes what that means, because they say, well, you have to say, even if he doesn't do it. And when I talk to God about that, I don't feel like that's what he said. He said, wait, I want you to have faith because I'm going to do it. And when I look at Abraham, I don't see once in the Bible, maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, that he ever said, well, maybe God isn't going to do this. He never did. And how many years did he have to wait? And now Sarah is the opposite of that. Sarah, the whole time, is like, I believe this is going to happen. And there was sin because of that. And Abraham wasn't perfect in that. But what I do believe is I'm supposed to believe God until he takes me off of assignment. And right now, he has me on assignment. And in the end, if all I'm doing is praying for somebody and he's getting better and God has transformed me to see what unconditional love is and to be a good helpmate, I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. And I still see his favor in all of it. And so, yeah, I come back here and I still get emotional. I still feel what I felt that day because it's still been 3 years and I'm still waiting. And sometimes I wonder why it's so long and why you have to wait, right? Seasons of waiting, they're not easy. I'm not coming to you today to tell you that my journey's been easy. I'm here to tell you today it's been good, even though it hurts sometimes, even though it's hard sometimes. And um, I, I think sometimes part of really knowing God's character is believing him until he tells you differently. Look, if God doesn't do it, then he'll be the one to take me off assignment. He'll be the one to tell me he's going to do it. But until he tells me otherwise, I don't want to give up on him. I want to have faith. I want to learn how to be a wife that prays, even if she's not seeing any results. I want to know what it's like to go to God first before my husband. And this is all the stuff God's taught me in this. He's taught me how to go to him and how to see him as my husband and how to pray for somebody and not see anything in return, which is unconditional love, and how to be a good helpmate because God is training me. And it's not conventional. And it's not easy. And maybe I'm wrong. But all I know is that I've seen God's faithfulness in it and his goodness and his transformation. And I don't want to give up on a promise just because the world says that I should. I want to go to my Father and I want to have faith. I want to be ready. I don't want to be someone that misses what God wants to do in their life because it doesn't happen in the time frame they thought or the way that they thought. And I don't think I could have thought that 3 years ago when I came here. 3 years ago, I was weeping, I was crying, and I was asking God, why? Why are you doing this? And it felt so cruel and it felt so angry because we want it right now. But I am more trained to be the godly wife that I've been praying to be for the last 13 years today than I was that 3 years ago, than I was when he sat on that log and he made me promises. And yeah, sometimes I feel crazy and sometimes I'm ashamed. But ultimately, in the end, what I'm so excited about is that I believe God's character so much that I have this much faith because I never had faith like this before. And I just trust that God's going to do what he says he's going to do. And I believe those promises one day will happen. That was made on that log. But sometimes it has to wait. So I came, I wept, and I came right here to this pole as I was ready to leave, ready to put these dogs back into back into the car. Although Lucy doesn't look like she wants to go back in today. She has a lot of energy. But I stood at this pole, and I remember this so clearly because it was such a changing point in my life where God said, "Do you remember what your father said to you today?" And I said, "Yeah." He said that he chose not to remember those bad times that I really hurt him and I dishonored him and I just wasn't what I was supposed to be as a child of God or his child. He said he didn't remember those times because he loved me. And I still get really emotional about this, but because he loved me and he would always love me and he chose to see the goodness in me. He chose to see all the things that he loved about me. Now, in the last 3 years, I've gone through some stuff with my family. Healing is hard, and the way we see things may not be the same. And we've had trials where it was good and trials where it was bad, and moments in which we didn't know if the relationship could be put back together. But what God showed me yesterday, sitting in that beauty, the whole reason I'm here today, the whole reason is God said to me, "Rachel, your father was reflecting me. He was reflecting my character right to you. He was an example of who I am." Because just like he forgave all the things you did to him, and guys, I did so much, like so much. And when he said that to me, I remember being in shock. I remember being in shock, like, dude, I have done so much, like so much to you. And you don't remember? Like, you just choose to remember me as this beautiful, amazing, awesome daughter. And it was such a reflection of how God looks at us. Like, he just doesn't remember the same. Like, I'm sitting here holding shame and guilt that God doesn't even remember. And I'm tormenting myself, but God is not even, all he sees is Jesus in me, his son and his sacrifice and the goodness. And hearing my father say that, and then God just showing me that, like it took 3 years to really see the impact of those beautiful words that my father so diligently said in obedience. For my father, that had to be hard. For him to choose, maybe it wasn't hard. Maybe it wasn't hard at all. I'm not sure, but like I had just said some somewhat hard things, not maybe painful things, but hard things to him. And it was always done in love. But his response was just pure love for me. And I started to think, because we have gone through some trials, me and my parents in this, and I've hurt them. They've hurt me. I haven't always responded like a godly person. They haven't always responded maybe in the best of their abilities at that time either. But that's the point. We're messy. We're humans. And if we try to be perfect, then we're going to miss the mark. The truth of it is, all of us kept going to God. All of us kept praying. All of us became so desperate on God to heal this relationship that we became more like him. And we started to actually reflect the character of God back to each other. And it's beautiful. I am so proud of my parents. I am so in awe of the fact that some parents will never get to a point where they can understand where my pain came from. They can apologize and they can be humbled and work on those things. I'm very blessed to have parents who have prayed for me the entire time, who have prayed for me from when I was young, who have showed me the example of Christ, who have stuck with me and have shown me unconditional love, because there was a season in this 3 years where I wasn't very loving towards them, but they continued to love me. And there was a season in which I had to reflect love back to them, and I had to stand firm. And there was people that told me over and over and over and over again that maybe that relationship would never be repaired. But God had me on assignment, and he told me it would never change. He said, pray, pray, pray. Sorry, he told me it would change because I was praying, praying, praying. And what God has done in that relationship, the faithfulness, the assignments, it's beautiful. It's so much an example of him. The unconditional love, the humility, and the reflection of being so desperate on him that we're reflecting God back to each other. Maybe when when I was a kid and stuff, maybe we didn't always reflect the character of a God all the time. But moving forward, this future that we have, we are. And it's messy, but it's God. It's beautiful. We're humans, we're not God. But I am so blown away from that. And it's just yesterday, God revealed all that to me. 3 years from the time I stood at this pole, and God told me that. And He said, "You have a choice, Rachel. You can see everything out of the pain that you're living under. You can see me as a God that is harsh and critical and tricked you into falling for someone and believing a fairy tale or a promise that's not going to come true. Or you can see me as a God who is faithful and remember all the good things and wait on me and know that I will do what I say I'm going to do." And so it was like when I left this very pole, one Rachel stayed here and a new Rachel walked to the car. And I knew, I saw it. I knew that that was the day everything would change. It didn't change right away. I'm still in process, guys. I'm not perfect, but I'm different. Everyone's different. And God has been answering His promises piece by piece. And I have been so into the Bible the last 3 years, and God told me that His name for me in heaven is Sarah because I'm His princess, but He wants to bring a generation through me. But I don't want to make the mistake of Sarah. I don't want to miss this whole process, the seasons, the beauty, the goodness of what He has right now. I just want to believe Him and be excited as I wait on His promises for me and not try to make things happen in my own. I want to learn from Sarah. I don't want to bash her because I think what she did was amazing and full of faith, and it'd be hard to leave everything you know and believe in a promise and not see it happen, and everybody's telling you it's impossible. I feel that. I understand that. I've been there. But I want to learn. I want to do things differently. I just want to believe God for His promises and enjoy the seasons that I have here, to like play in the snow and to look at it and say how beautiful it is. Do you know, a year and a half later, I came back to this place after I finished my journal of all the pain I've been through and all the trauma. And I stood right there and I worshiped God, and I had flags, and it was beautiful. It was spring and everything was coming out. It was a different season, different purpose. And I had flipped all the lies that I believed from my childhood and turned them into God's truth. And I repeated them out loud as I said the things that, instead of, maybe the things I believed where I wasn't good enough, I said, God has made me perfect in His image. And I said all these things until this day. It's in my battle prayer journal that I have, and I repeat them because that's who I really am. That's who God sees me. I don't have to be the person that I was, live the trauma or live under the pain and hurt. God's exposed these things to me. My heart isn't hard anymore. I'm not perfect. I've said it a million times because I'm not. But at least I know who my Father is. And at least I've learned to enjoy the seasons. I can laugh. I can play. I can be free. And I pray that this year I'll be even better at it. And then next year, even better. So one day, just like I'm standing here now and I don't recognize that Rachel that was here 3 years ago, I'll come back to this same place. Honestly, I hope my reception is here for my wedding. That day, I can look out and have all the memories of how I didn't realize that this was possible, but it was so much better than it could be. And I'm grateful for everyone that's gone on this journey with me, and I love watching him change. And I'm so grateful for my parents and the humility and the love and the support and my friends, because I wouldn't be here without them today. And it's crazy because this is where it started. And I think it's where it's going to end eventually. Whoop, whoop, whoop.